Hi, welcome to Human Nutrition. I would like to provide you guys a short little video with the PowerPoints and my voiceover to give you just a quick overview of the chapters. I do think you're going to need to take a little more time to go through them, but I just wanted to highlight a few of the slides that I think are important. The first area that you'll see is what we eat and why. And there's lots of different factors that affect our food choices, but what we have found is typically taste is why people choose the foods that they choose. It is known that most people eat around 25 to 50 foods, and that's it. So we really have a limited selection of our foods. A lot of it is based on our routines and habits, which might have to do on food cost and some of those other things. But for the most part, it's this food, flavor, and texture that people make those choices. When we look at our food spending, we spend about 12% of our income on food, which is actually the lowest in any developed nation. So it's interesting that we do. We think we spend a lot on food, but actually, in comparative to some of the other developed nations, we actually do not. I want to talk a little bit about hunger and the difference between hunger and appetite. Hunger is really that physiological drive to eat. I always say that's kind of like your stomach saying, I need food, where appetite is more the psychological drive. I feel like appetite is what drives a lot of people to eat. An example of this is when you're not hungry, but someone presents you with a food that you really enjoy, you'll typically eat that food. And satiety is the place in which you no longer want to eat, and that's typically regulated by the hypothalamus in the brain. And what's interesting about satiety is that a meal's composition is really what determines if that meal is going to provide that satiety. And protein and fat in the meal are critical elements to providing satiety. And I think that's one of the reasons why carbs have gotten kind of a bad rap, is that you can eat a lot of carbs and not feel satisfied. But if you add fat and protein to those carbs, you typically feel more satisfied. Nutrition, which we're going to be studying all semester, is basically the science that links foods to health and disease. We're going to talk a lot about the food aspect of nutrition. I want to talk a little bit about what an essential nutrient is. This is something that our body cannot make and has a special function in the body. So for example, vitamin C. We as humans cannot make vitamin C. In fact, most other mammals can make vitamin C. Humans and guinea pigs are actually the only mammals that don't. So vitamin C is considered essential for humans and guinea pigs. So why should we study nutrition? Well, for a lot of you, you have to take it for your nursing courses, but some of you are just generally interested since we all eat. And one thing that I want to point out is basically about 2/3 of all the deaths in this country have nutrition-related factors. Some people say that though of those diseases of the heart, cancer, and stroke and diabetes, that 90% of those diseases could be controlled with diet alone. Let's get into the nutrients, and we're going to study these much more in depth throughout the semester, but the 6 classes of nutrients are the carbohydrates, the lipids, which are fats, proteins, vitamins, minerals, and water. Nutrients have different functional categories. They provide calories, they provide for growth and maintenance, they help regulate different processes in our body. Carbohydrates primarily provide calories. They're our major source of energy for our brain, and they're made up of both sugars and complex carbohydrates. Fats actually come from both plant and animal sources, and they typically have higher calories, but they are also required for the body. Proteins provide a lot of the structural material to build and repair. They're a source of what we call amino acids. And those proteins, most Americans get more than adequate protein, especially lots of protein from animal sources, which isn't always the best source of protein. Vitamins and minerals are both micronutrients because we need those in smaller amounts. And then we also consider water a nutrient. One of the things I want to bring up is something called a phytochemical. Phyto means plant, and chemicals are exactly that, chemicals. Phytochemicals are kind of extra credit things found in certain foods, especially in fruits and vegetables. For example, blueberries contain a phytochemical called anthocyanins, which have been shown to reduce the risk of cancer and heart disease. A study was recently released that found that women who had blueberry consumption frequently in their diet had significantly less heart disease than those who did not. So those phytochemicals provide for a lot for us. Energy is the component of food that we need as humans to provide the fuel for our body. The way that we measure that energy is in something called a calorie, or what you'll see this term right here, this abbreviation, a kilocalorie. So that calorie is actually a measurement of heat. Okay, we will refer to the kilocalorie because that's actually, even though we say calories, it's actually a kilocalorie. And this just shows you on a food label, you could actually do the calculation to see where those calories come from. The calories all come from three sources: proteins, carbohydrates, and fats. Alcohol actually does have calories, but we don't consider it essential. One of the topics that we talked about in Why Study Nutrition is the importance of studying it because of the diseases that are related to it, to common causes of death. And in the United States, the biggest reason that the diseases that we have, heart disease, cancer, stroke, and diabetes, is because of our increased obesity rates in this country. And you can see by these color codes, Colorado is the only state left in the nation that doesn't have at least 25% of people obese, which is really pretty sad. We'll learn more about that later too. So typically what we like to see in as far as how many the calories in our diet is that we would like those to be about 10 to 35% from protein. And again, most Americans eat more than adequate protein, but the problem is we get too many from animal sources, which tend to be high in cholesterol and saturated fat, and not enough from plant sources, things like legumes, which are beans, and nuts and seeds, which tend to have a lot more of those phytochemicals, and also no fat and no cholesterol. Carbohydrates are not a bad thing. Our brain does require them as its primary energy source. The problem is in America, we get most of our carbohydrate intake from simple sugars. And again, with fat, it's not that fat is a bad thing, it's just that we tend to eat more from animals and less from plants. So really what I want you to get from this is that the American diet is really heavy on animal sources of protein and fat and simple carbohydrates, and where we want to be heading is more of the complex whole grains with plant sources of proteins and fats. We'll skip through a couple of these. And the last part of this talks a little bit about eating well in college. Some of you are typical college students, many of you are not, and this may or may not apply to you. But what I really try to tell people about eating well in college is definitely to eat breakfast. I'm a big advocate of this limit liquid calories. What I usually tell people is don't drink your calories. Try to get calories from food. They provide a lot more satiety. The only exceptions I would say to that would be low-fat dairy products, and if you're over 21, an occasional glass of alcohol, because that can be found to be beneficial as well. So I hope this short overview of the lecture helped you. The next steps are for you to make sure that you read the chapter 1. I also have provided you with a review sheet, and that can be found on D2L. I'll show you where that is on D2L. It's right under the week 1 materials, and that review sheet is not required, but what that does do is give you some more specific questions. So the review sheet is here. I've also listed a term sheet. These are very helpful tools to prepare for the Chapter 1 quiz. That Chapter 1 quiz is due by June 3rd, which is Monday, by 11 p.m. In addition, you'll need to reply to one of these 3 discussion topics, and please make sure you review the discussion rubrics because I do grade pretty tightly on those discussions. All right. Please email me if you have any other questions. Note that I don't typically check emails on the weekends. And I look forward to updating you next week on Chapter 2. Thanks so much.